The song More Than Enough was written by Rob Johnson, and I first started to play it probably about 10 years ago now, accompanying my father-in-law, the very great Roy Bailey, who sang quite a number of Rob's songs. Roy was a proper singer of folk songs and people's songs. He used to say, if you think I'm a political folk singer, that says more about you than it does about me or my choice of songs. He said, I'm just singing about real people and real life. When Roy was 52, he had heart failure, and he was an academic. He was at Hallam University teaching and head of the faculty there. And he was an academic and a singer. And he had heart failure. And he was given 3 years to live and told, you should just stop stressful situations. You should remove them from your life. So basically, he stopped his academia and he went off and he sang. And 30 years later, he was still singing. This was in 2018. But his health was very dodgy. He had to take massive amounts of drugs to keep him going. And in 2018, his health really started to fail, and he had edema, which meant that he had to be drained. He had to go into hospital 4 or 5 times a week to have drainage, because otherwise the fluid build-up would have killed him. And in the summer, he managed all his gigs, and as he went into the autumn, he was just getting more and more ill. And the NHS blessed them. They looked after him so well, and they said to him eventually, they said, we think you should consider having a pacemaker because it will regulate your heartbeat. If your heartbeat is regulated, it could improve your quality of life. Not necessarily definite, but it could really allow you to be more comfortable and to live a little longer. And so we waited to hear if Roy was going to have this operation, and eventually they gave him a date of October the 16th, 2018, and he said, well, that's unfortunate, I'm afraid, because it's actually my 83rd birthday on the 19th, and on the 20th I've got my birthday gig, and I have to do that gig. So he didn't have his pacemaker, and he went and we did a gig together in Sheffield. And he was very ill, and he completely pulled it out of the bag. And 3 weeks later, he went into St. Luke's Hospice in Sheffield, who were wonderful. And he went downhill very quickly, and he had oxygen tubes up his nose, and he was sedated, and he was asleep much of the time. And all through that last month, I would go and sit and play to him a lot. And one afternoon in the hospice, I was playing him. I was just playing More Than Enough. And he was, as far as I knew, he was completely unconscious, and he just opened his eyes and he sang the last verse of that song, and it pretty much finished me off. It was incredibly moving, and that was the last time he ever sang anything, so it's more than enough. There's always the money for missiles and tanks. There's always the money for generals and banks. There's always the money for new ways to kill, but a limited budget for you when you're ill. Yes, there's always enough for a war, so there's never enough for the poor. There's always the money for tunnels and roads, for opera and ballet, but what about homes for MPs' expenses and fat subsidies? But there's never enough for nurseries, and the well-off, they always take more, so there's never enough for the poor. There's always the money for tests they can pass, or fail you for not being white middle class. There's always the goodies for those with most greed, so there's never enough for those in most need. And there's a pay rise if you're on the board, so there's never enough for the poor. Consider how little of life that we know. We bring nothing, take nothing, pass through and go. We are all of us poor when it comes to the night, in need of the darkness, in need of the light. If we'd learn to want less and love more, there'd be enough for the poor. If we'd learn to want less and love more, there'd be enough for the poor. For there's more than enough for us all.